start the, and it does look like we are streaming live on YouTube. So good afternoon and welcome to the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services. It is Thursday, March the 3rd, and we are assembled around our electronic horseshoe streaming live on the HHS channel on the Maine State Legislature's YouTube, where you can find the replay of today's proceedings as well, and all of our proceedings. We'll take this opportunity to make introductions, starting with Representative Zager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sam Zager. I represent District 41 in Portland.
And Representative Lemelin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Lemlin. I represent House District 88, Chelsea, Jefferson, Whitefield, and half of Nobleboro.
Representative Stover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Holly Stover. I represent House District 89, including the towns of Boothbay, Boothbay Harbor, Southport Edgecombe, Westport Island, and South Bristol.
And Representative Perry.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Ann Perry. I represent House District 140, which includes the communities of Indian Township, Baileyville, Barron, Calais, Charlotte, Robbinston, Perry, Pembroke, and Pleasant Point.
And Representative Griffin.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abigail Griffin. I represent House District 102, which is Glenburn, Levant, and Cadescate.
Representative Craven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Craven, and I represent House District 59, which is part of Lewiston.
Representative Madigan.
Good afternoon. I'm Colleen Madigan. I represent House District 110, which is part of Waterville and part of Oakland.
And Representative Javner.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Javner, and I represent House District 141, which is located in Penobscot and Washington counties.
Senator Moore.
Good afternoon. I'm Marianne Moore, and I represent Senate District 6, which is all of Washington County, as well as Goldsboro, Winter Harbor, and Sullivan in Hancock County as well. And
Senator Claxton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ned Claxton, and I'm honored to represent Senate District 20, which consists of Auburn, Minot, Mechanic Falls, Poland, and New Gloucester.
And I am Representative Michelle Myers, serving Southern Maine's District 2, which is all of Elliott, where I live, and parts of Kittery and South Berwick. Also with us today are our analysts. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Broom. I'm one of the two legislative analysts for this committee, and I work in the Nonpartisan Office of Policy and Legal Analysis.
And Karen Thomas.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Thomas. Happy to be the clerk for the Health and Human Services Committee. If you need assistance, please email me, hhs@legislature.maine.gov.
So this afternoon, we will be taking testimony on 1 LD 1748. Then we will move into work sessions on LDs 343 and 1772. On the public hearing, we'll take testimony in the following order: the legislator introducing, any other legislators, those in support, those in opposition, and then those neither for nor against. You may submit written testimony up until the day of the work session on this and any other bill. We ask that you not use the chat for policy-related comments or questions, and if we've missed you and you wish to testify, raise your hand and we'll bring you over. For the uninitiated to Zoom public hearings, you'll be brought over from the attendee room. You'll experience a period of deep space before you land here with us. Hang on, you'll get here. When we have many in the queue, and we do have quite a few signed up today, we run a 3-minute clock on testimony. What this means is that at the 2.5-minute point, you'll be given a signal, and we ask that you kindly try to bring your testimony to a conclusion. So with that, I would open the public hearing on LD 1748 and welcome its sponsor, Senator Claxton, to introduce the bill.
Thank you, Representative Meyer and colleagues of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Ned Claxton, as you heard, and I still live in Auburn and represent Auburn, Minot, Mechanic Falls, Poland, and New Gloucester. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce LD 1748, which is an act regarding the so-called leveraging investments so families can thrive report. It was produced by the Department of Health and Human Services. To review briefly, the Leveraging Investment So Families Can Thrive report, or LIFT, came out of legislation introduced in the 129th legislature. That included LD 1772, introduced by then Representative and now Senator Stewart, an act to secure transitions to economic prosperity for Maine families and children, known as the STEP bill, and LD 1774 by Speaker Gideon, an act to reduce child poverty by leveraging investments so families can thrive. It came to be known as the LIFT bill. This bipartisan collaboration was focused on identifying and promoting interventions and supports that measurably helped families to successfully transition out of poverty. To do that well, there was a need for data to help better understand the varied elements contributing to child and family poverty. There was also a need to examine the value of efforts to help with the transition and any barriers to success. The initial LIFT report last year summarized the work that had been done so far. And at that time, it was understood that we would learn from that report and subsequent reports to continue to improve their value in this effort to decrease poverty. Today's bill, LD 1748, is the next step in that process. From the first and second reports, we learned of several opportunities to improve how we support families who want to escape poverty. As examples, we saw evidence that families who qualify for TANF support are having trouble accessing it, that TANF was not supporting the progression to gainful employment, and that TANF recipients were not ending up on an appropriate educational path. We also learned that some of the data wasn't particularly helpful. It did not need to be in the next report. Other parts of the data needed to be improved to become more valuable in this assessment and monitoring process. LD 1748 is trying to build on what has been learned so far. For example, we can now compare the success of the HOPE project and use it to enhance the Parents as Scholars program. To do that and be successful with other supports, we now know that the various resources the state offers need to be more readily accessible to the families when they are ready for them. Given the state's employment needs, we need the families who are struggling now to be consistently making the transition to fuller employment, whether it's by job training or advancing education. This bill also incorporates the extensive work that was done to bring current and former recipients of TANF into the improvement process. The Department of HHS and the advocates deserve credit for their contributions to this work and to the conversations that have led us to where we are now. There's more work to be done, but this bill is designed to advance that effort. Thank you for your consideration. I'll try to answer any questions, but there are people who will follow who are more informed than I and will likely be able to answer those questions.
Thank you, Senator. Questions for the bill's sponsor from the committee? Seeing none. We are going to take testimony in alphabetical order by first name. So we would welcome Ann Danforth.
Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Ann Danforth, and I'm a policy advocate at Maine Equal Justice. I'm also testifying today on behalf of Invest in Tomorrow, an initiative started in 2017 when Maine organizations, businesses, and individuals came together to identify the primary contributing factors that are keeping families in poverty throughout the state and to identify key policy solutions. In 2019, this collective, which includes the State Chamber of Commerce, worked with former Speaker Sarah Gideon and then Representative Trey Stewart, as you've heard, to support the bipartisan Invest in Tomorrow bill package, Lift and Step, with the goal of both reducing child poverty and strengthening Maine's workforce. LD 1748 is a priority for this collective, and individual steering committee members will be testifying in support today as well. Among other important changes, the Invest in Tomorrow bill package required an annual report from DHHS to measure the progress being made in areas related to child poverty and family well-being. The data from these first two LIFT reports, expertise which has been shared with this committee from people with lived experiences about how we can improve TANF, and over 20 years of evidence-based learning about what works and what doesn't work to help families succeed, all point to the urgency and payoff of the changes in this bill. We also want to acknowledge the positive steps DHHS is already taking to make needed improvements in the TANF Aspire program. We're also intrigued by the department's discussion related to using the poverty level as part of the TANF eligibility methodology and hope it will be explored further. The February 2022 LIFT report shows that many families aren't getting the support they need to succeed from the TANF Aspire program. TANF is serving only 22% of families with children in poverty. 82% of families leaving TANF in 2020 were still living in poverty, either because they had no earnings or their earnings were so low. We know higher education can be a pathway out of poverty, which is why the Parents as Scholars program was created. Yet 3 out of 4 people who moved off TANF didn't obtain education or training opportunities beyond high school. And the number of parents enrolled in Parents as Scholars is currently only 23 people. This bill will help move the needle on some of these very troubling data points. These changes in this bill are also part of a national trend of states reforming their state TANF programs to reflect what has been learned in the past 25 years since TANF in its current form was established. While these learnings are backed by science, they're also backed by experts in how TANF could improve, TANF participants themselves. The policy changes proposed in this bill should also be seen as part of our state's workforce solution, supporting the goals of the state's 10-year economic development plan in the report of the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee. That a strong TANF Aspire program is tied to the success of our workforce is reflected by the State Chamber of Commerce's involvement in Invest in Tomorrow. And I would encourage the committee to read the written testimony the Chamber will be submitting later today, as they weren't able to present that testimony live today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Danforth. Questions for Ann Danforth? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We'll move to Alina Diaz. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Just getting myself off of mute. So good morning, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Health and Human Service Committee. My name is Alina Diaz, and I live in Jefferson, Maine. I'm here today in support of LD 1748 and to tell you how Aspire and Parents as Scholars, if administered appropriately, has the power to lift people out of poverty. I was enrolled in the Aspire program for about 5 years, and I was able to graduate from the University of Maine system with a bachelor's degree in 2021. And I recently found employment at an organization that provides me with fair wages and benefits that have allowed me for the first time in my life to envision a reality where I will not need to rely on government assistance in order to have my family's basic needs met. But more than that, this is the first time I've been able to entertain the prospect of building financial stability, repairing my credit, saving for retirement, and eventually, most importantly for me, is owning my own home. An existence without the constant worry about shelter, warmth, food, or safety is one in which many low-income people like me have not been able to comprehend. When I was introduced to TANF and Aspire, and especially the Parents as Scholars program, I had a newfound hope that maybe with hard work, I could overcome the barriers that had kept me in the cycle of poverty. But Parents as Scholars seemed to be kept under wraps at the time, and I was originally never informed of the support services that I qualified for within the program. And I soon experienced a program that struggled to function, and that that also discouraged the use of the best features that it had, like financial support for parents while they're in school. While enrolled in this program, I expected a breaking down of the barriers that I was facing, but more often than not, more obstacles seem to be placed in my way. And like many of the others whose testimonies you will hear and read today, Aspire left me more hopeless, hurt, and traumatized than when I entered the program. And many times I wanted to quit. I had to fight for every support service, childcare payment, car repair, and transportation allowance that I needed and that I qualified for. And I even had to ask to be treated with general respect and professionalism. And the LIFT bill begins to correct these programs, and they really do hold so much power. The way I feel on the other side of the fight is indescribable. And knowing today that I have the credentials and skills to provide for myself and to give my kids more opportunities than I had, it's really priceless. But I achieved this. But I achieved the success not because of Aspire, but despite the many broken promises I endured throughout my experiences in the program. So voices like mine and the others here today need to be heard so that Maine can administer trauma-informed programs and meet participants where they are, offering support and encouragement. So I just encourage you all to really listen to the people here today and to read their testimonies and to feel what we've experienced in this program. That's been very hard and hopefully change for the better.
Well, thank you
Thank
for being here
you.
today and telling us your story. Questions for Lena? Seeing none, welcome Allison Perkins.
Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Mayor, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Allison Perkins, and I'm a resident of Cornville. I'm here to testify in favor of LD 1748. For over 10 years, I worked for social service programs in Maine, and 8 of those years as an eligibility specialist for the Maine Department of Health and Human Services for the TANF, bank care, and food supplement programs. Based on that experience, I wanted to bring to your attention today the urgent need to help meet Maine's lowest income families where they are and able to being publicly informed the programming offered by the state of Maine to help lift them out of poverty and into the workforce. By strengthening that individualized approach and engaging impacted families themselves in evaluating the TANF Aspire programming, LD 1748 takes important steps towards reaching that goal. Moreover, I was pleased to hear the commissioner say, as she presented the most recent LIFT report last week, that the department is planning on adding 16 or so limited period state employee positions to work as coaches for the TANF families who experience particular difficulties in reaching their goals. There is an eye toward making these positions permanent in another year if this project is successful, which I believe it will be. LD 1748 will give the department and these workers important new tools to help families reach greater economic security. We've seen both in the data from the LIFT reports that you have received and the commissioner's description of the corrective action required under our current outsourced agreement, how contracted DHHS work has left the most vulnerable with unmet needs and has been harmful to the progress in their career goals and poverty outcomes. We should be setting people up for success for continued education and trades training, not setting them back. I was very pleased to see the focus on the need for greater culturally and linguistically appropriate services in LD 1748. Programming context, rules, time, and patience is often lost with language interpreter services at DHHS, and language and culture are often not observed as they should be in developing strong relationships with the families they serve. LD 1748 emphasizes the need to train folks during this work and ensuring the provision of more appropriate services, including better communication through spoken languages for new Mainers like Somali, Spanish, and French. I believe investing. Thank you. I believe in investing in partnerships, either through grants or allocated bill funding, for community resources to promote programs like Parents as Scholars and the TANF program in places like domestic violence and homeless shelters, community action programs, the WIC program throughout Maine, and this would increase the participation rate for families. When I started as an eligibility specialist, DHHS was still using the caseload model where workers were trained to incorporate and make sure clients had a list of local community resources where they could collaborate and help people most efficiently. We were more in tune with clients to meet with families living in generational poverty, being able to easier identify the folks that we knew didn't have the familial, social, and financial safety nets it takes to be able to rise above the poverty line and would have a chance to thrive with being able to utilize education or trades training programs like this. The new case coaches that will be hired are important changes to this bill, will help to repair those components lost along the way under the current business model. And it is past time we put the human back in human services. Thank you for your time and service for the state of Maine, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Allison Perkins? Seeing none. Appreciate your being here today. We'll move to Ellen Mizalski. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Mizalski, and I'm reading testimony of Adrian Cook, who couldn't be here today. Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the committee, my name is Adrian Cook, and I live in Dexter. I'm a young mom, and I'm the caretaker of 2 children, ages 9 and 7. One is my biological son, and one is my nephew. I recently got a job at Hannaford to help make ends meet, but my real dream is to become a librarian in a small town like mine. I'd been receiving help from TANF as a part of the state of emergency pandemic services. Once the state of emergency lifted, I no longer had help. I've reached my 60 months on TANF, but I've lost time in the past couple of years because of the direction FedCap brought me in. I feel that they directed me away from my goals for 2 semesters, and I lost time towards my goal of becoming a librarian. I'm very upset about this. I was discouraged from going to school for library sciences because they said I should major in something that had a better job outlook. So for 2 semesters and thousands of dollars in loans, I took their advice, but it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, and I knew that. I felt pushed into the change instead of helped finding my path. I feel like I don't have this time to waste. I have a lot going on with my 2 kids who have high medical needs. My son has diabetes and was in a diabetic coma for a week after being misdiagnosed. Both kids have mental health needs given what they've been through in their lives. We're currently living with my son's grandparents, and they are facing bankruptcy. There's a lot going on for us, and I need support services that help me get on my feet and reach my goals in what's a really challenging time. When I asked for support from FedCap, I often felt like I was fighting with them instead of getting encouragement and support. When I was in school, it was hard for me to scrape together money for books. I've had to take online classes on a dinosaur of a laptop that isn't reliable and slows me down. When I asked for help with books, technology, and paying for repairs on my car, I was told there was no money available. I know that FedCap was wrong about all of this. There is support available to parents who are in school. There should be even more support, and it should be easier to access. FedCap also said they'd help me find work. They dropped the ball. I found the job at Hannaford with the help of my DHHS case manager, not my FedCap worker. I tried to do parents as scholars, but I couldn't stay on when I changed my major at FedCap's request, and my grades suffered. When you're going through hard times, you need people to encourage you and not to tell you that your goals and dreams aren't valid. I feel if I had stayed the course of library sciences, my grades wouldn't have gone down, and I would have stayed on parents as scholars. I wouldn't have lost.
Ellen.
Thank you. I wouldn't have lost my financial aid and would be further along towards my goals. If I had gotten support on the cost of going to school, it would have been less stressful to pay bills and keep food on the table. I often thought with FedCap, what is the point to continue? We need a change in the kinds of supports low-income families receive. Working with FedCap set me back a lot. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for being here and reading that testimony. Appreciate it. Moving on to Katie Hughes. Welcome.
Hi, Senator Claxton, Representative Mayer, and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Katie Hughes, and I live in Waterville. I'm a Family Services Coordinator with Educare Central Maine. I work directly with families who participate in the Aspire program currently administered by FedCap. I'm here to speak in support of LD 1748 because I see what low-income families are going through to reach their goals of economic stability. I see the barriers and programs that are meant to help families. I see the ways that FedCap has created a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't work for many of the families I work with and can unfortunately too often set them back. The hardest part of the job is to see the impact on the kids we work with. Their parents are trying really hard to climb out of poverty and give them a better life, but the odds feel stacked against them. Still, I am hopeful that with your support, we can make needed changes to the Aspire program so it better serves families. One of the most common experiences I have working with families is their desire to further their education. Many families struggle to make school happen. They become discouraged when they think about the childcare costs, the transportation, the cost of books and technology. Still, they know that they need a degree to make enough ends to meet. Too often, TANF families don't know what is available and aren't told about programs like Parents as Scholars, even when they ask. There's a feeling that FedCap workers are steering them towards dead-end, low-paying jobs instead of a real future for their families. Some families need their GED or high set so that they can move on to college from there. I worked with one family who did not have a high school diploma, and when she asked to go back to school, she was told by her FedCap worker that they didn't support parents with getting their GED or high set. She then lost her childcare and reached her 5-year TANF limit. I no longer work with her, but I knew that the only support that she had when she left our program was her housing choice voucher. She lived in a rural area with no transportation and battled with substance use recovery. I also feel that FedCap doesn't understand mental health or how to work compassionately with people who have been through trauma. If a family is not able to advocate for themselves around their mental health and really push for that help, FedCap doesn't offer support. This is not acceptable in a system that works with people in poverty. The current program doesn't consider the diverse experience of families in Maine. What a rural family might need will differ from someone who lives in downtown Waterville. What an immigrant family needs is very different from what a family who has grown up here needs. What a
30
single
seconds.
mom, a domestic violence survivor, and a parent in recovery might need varies from person to person. At Educare, we try to look at the whole person and their family and respond to their needs from there. But in the current Aspire program, if you don't fit within the FedCap mold, you won't be successful. I feel that the Aspire program could be so much better if they truly met families where they are at and supported them in their goals. I am hopeful that we are able to find ways to better support Maine families. Families in Maine deserve a fair chance in difficult times. Access to education, training, childcare, transportation, and a trauma-informed approach that meets families where they are at can make the difference. I thank you for your time today.
And we thank you for being here. Questions for Katie Hughes? Seeing none, we'll welcome Katie Robbins.
Hey there, Senator Claxton, Representative Mayer, and members of the committee. My name is Katie Robbins, and I am here to testify in support of LD 1748. I'm a mom of 4 children, and I have spent several years on and off TANF since my first child, which was at 21, and I'm now 31, so about 10 years on and off. I'd like to speak about my most recent experiences with them. I recently, with the help of ACAP up in Northern Maine and the workforce program with WCCC, was able to finish school for my CADC. However, this is something that I have been in school working towards since 2009. Through all of those years, I never have received support through any of the TANF programs to help me get there. The only resource I had that helped me with my education was through ACAP's program and the workforce opioid grant. So that was really shocking to me that it took so many years, and I also had no support. So I recently relocated to Southern Maine from Aroostook County in an effort to help advance my career and my resources. So one thing I experienced when I moved here was I had childcare up north with my plan, but when I moved here and I got childcare within 2 days, it took them about 2 to 3 weeks to approve my childcare. And I am opening a nonprofit, which they tell me does not count toward any of my hours. And it took several weeks to get my volunteer work to count. And the person that told me that they told me it didn't count because they don't cover volunteering out of the county, which after consulting with a legal advocate told me that that was actually completely untrue. So they literally just lied to me to avoid having to assist me. This has been something that's been standing. I've had to as everyone has said, fight. I am a recovery coach and I help coach people through processes like this. And as a strong individual, I am able to jump through the hoops, although even I at times feel like it is not worth it. If you break down the amount of TANF, which is the same across the state, it works out to $3.48 an hour. If you're required to do 40 hours of job search and whatnot a week. So we are expected to jump through hoops, be talked down to, be lied to.
30 seconds, Katie.
Okay, and we're expected to go through this for $3.48 an hour with 4 children, mind you, and car payment and rent, which leads me into, if I did not have a Section 8 voucher, I would never have been able to follow my dreams of moving down to Southern Maine, because rent down here is $1,600 for a 2-bedroom apartment, and my TANF is $558. There is no way that that would have worked. Essentially, that is my point. I appreciate your guys' time and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you for being here today. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. We will move on at this point to LaDonna Pavetti. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is LaDonna Pavetti, and I lead our work on TANF at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. I'm testifying today in support of LD 1748 because it advances several of the core elements that over the past 2 decades, we have learned help to significantly improve the circumstances of TANF families. Before I begin, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself. Before coming to the center, I was a senior fellow at Mathematica, a leading social policy research firm. I've worked on TANF since its beginning 25 years ago. Most recently, I have been asked to help improve TANF work programs by several state agencies, including Vermont, Louisiana, and Michigan, to name a few. I also regularly work with advocates in more than half the states and recently conducted focus groups with TANF recipients in 3 states, including Maine. Now, I'd like to focus on key elements of effective programs and how LD 1748 will strengthen each of these. First, effective programs are trauma-informed. Many families that turn to TANF are fleeing domestic violence, live in extreme poverty, or have experienced significant adversity as a child. LD 1748 expressly addresses this reality by requiring that participants be screened for trauma and provided with services that will provide safety, offer participants choice, encourage collaboration, engender trust, and empower recipients to identify and build on their strengths. Unfortunately, limited understanding of trauma science when TANF was created has led to policies that often re-traumatize families by setting unrealistic expectations, ignoring families' individual circumstances, and punishing families for not meeting the unrealistic expectations placed on them. Second, they're individualized and focused on the whole family. TANF recipients are not homogeneous, but TANF worker programs often treat them as though they are. Most programs demand that every family participate in a narrow set of activities for a set number of hours per week and that they take the first job that comes along. Staff spend their time enforcing rigid requirements rather than providing the support that will lead to long-term success. Federal law gives states flexibilities to develop individual employment paths for families that will maximize their chances of economic success and mobility. I applaud the approach taken by LD 1748 to individualize services, open the door wider to educational opportunities, and establish more flexible policies that will remove barriers to success, especially in post-secondary education programs. Finally, successful programs create optimal conditions for achieving success. In recent years, behavioral science has contributed significantly to our understanding of what human service agencies can do to support families to achieve economic mobility. Key strategies include reducing barriers to participation, creating slack by setting realistic expectations, and empowering recipients by allowing them to spend their time doing what will help them to achieve their goals and less of what is imposed upon them because they are simply a TANF recipients and in need of help. Provisions of LD 1748 that add support for pre-matriculation services and set realistic expectations regarding study time will relieve unnecessary burdens and help promote success for TANF families. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and I would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Pavetti. Questions from the committee? I have one. So we're part of what 1748 is doing is an attempt to improve the report that comes back, the LIFT report that comes back from the department by adding a survey and collecting data directly from impacted people. So I'm wondering if you could comment based on your experience on the value of that kind of qualitative information, that kind of approach to improving the report back that we get as a committee.
Yes, so there is a movement to actually do much more of having participant voices be heard. And part of that is because we often have blind spots and we miss some of the information. So you can't design a report that will capture the information that people have already shared here today. And that's the kind of information that really helps to improve programs. So it really is a way of having another lens on what's going on and really helping committees such as yours to really do what is best for families and continually move the needle forward in terms of improvements.
Thank you. And thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on, we will hear next from Lisa Black. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Lisa Black, and I live in Bangor, Maine. I am the director of Kennebec Valley Community College's TRIO Educational Opportunity Program. I do not represent KVCC or the Maine Community College system. Instead, I'm here today on my own time and of my own accord as a private citizen because I believe firmly in the power of higher education as a pathway out of generational poverty. I also see the enormous barriers to earning a college degree that low-income student parents face every day. Parents of scholars have such potential to be the boost these individuals need to change their families' trajectories and to build Maine's workforce, but its current design practically guarantees that participants will not be successful. I would like to speak today in support of LD 1748 and highlight a few changes it proposes to parents of scholars that would greatly enhance participant success and increase overall participation in the program. First, the expectation that Aspire recipients can succeed in their programs with just 1 hour of study time per credit hour is unrealistic. To qualify for Aspire, participants must be enrolled in academic programs leading to employment in high demand sectors of the workforce. That means that these programs are rigorous by design. Programs like nursing, respiratory therapy, and others are so demanding that full-time enrollment almost never happens. Even students without family responsibilities and financial constraints are advised to take general education classes separate from their core classes because their program curricula are so demanding. In my experience, these programs require far more study time than Aspire allows to achieve the minimum grades necessary to move forward in these specialized fields. There are models that allow for increased study time and part-time pathways that work very well in the HOPE program, and parents of scholars should be brought into accordance with them. Next, we should ensure that the Parents of Scholars program in general is accessibly designed. This means simplifying and streamlining the application process and ensuring that all communication coming from PASS is trauma-informed and linguistically appropriate, but also hearing directly from current participants and prospective applicants about their lived experiences with the program. Partnering with directly impacted students to design services has led to very high completion rates in my particular program, and I know the same would be true for PASS. We can start by listening to the feedback we already have from would-be applicants or participants who have had to drop out of PASS and provide knowledgeable and culturally sensitive navigators to demystify the application process, both for PASS and for college in general, and to provide services to help participants matriculate in college that would count toward Aspire hours. It takes a great deal of time, effort, and planning to select and prepare for an appropriate program of study. And all too often, well-intentioned students who rush through or don't understand the process drop out when they hit walls that this bill would prevent.
30 seconds, Lisa.
Finally, I want to assure you that the parents who would benefit from these reforms are so worth the investment. They are exactly the hardworking people we need in Maine's workforce. Parents of scholars hold such promise as a game changer for so many Maine parents who do not currently hold a credential of value. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my observations. I ask that you support LD 1748, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Lisa Black? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We'll move to Louisa DePrez. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the committee. My name is Louisa DePrez. I'm Professor Emerita of Sociology at the University of Southern Maine with a 50-year record of working towards the elimination of poverty. I was also at the table when both Parents as Scholars and the Competitive Skills Scholarship Program were designed and launched. I then spent years doing some of the then only research in the country on how these programs impacted the lives of parents, families, and children. So I'm delighted that Senator Claxton has brought LD 1748 to the floor. An essential component of this legislation is its recognition of the critical importance of collecting, analyzing, and integrating both quantitative and qualitative data as vital to the betterment of progressive and equitable public policies. Researchers have long realized that if they want to tell the full, true story of policy interventions, it is essential that they collect information from program participants. Participants illuminate their life circumstances in ways that numbers cannot. They help us understand how and when services are used and articulate impediments to accessing them, lessening their ability to succeed. It is this experiential understanding that is directly associated with both program and policy improvements. Our surveys of past and CSSP participants, as in thousands of surveys, always included both quantitative and qualitative data. So ensuring that this is also the case in forthcoming DHHS reports is in keeping with accepted policy analysis protocols. We went beyond number crunching and into participants' lives. Not doing so limits understanding and leaves the data lifeless. If I, for example, were to tell you that 14% of Maine children live in poverty, what would you know? Not very much. But if you were to talk to those children and uncover a bit more of their lives, of their experiences of being poor, your understanding of that percentage, that number, would increase dramatically and become real. When we are unable to provide an accurate, more complete picture of both the accomplishments and challenges of families whose lives are often dictated by public policy, we are incapable of altering programs to ensure their success. Guidance from participants improves data processing and analysis, enriching the interpretation of findings. We can then heighten a program's positive effects while minimizing harm. And it gives legislators like yourselves assurance that the programs designed in this state work in the ways in which they were intended. Thanks. This legislation affords the state the opportunity to do this. Frankly, it's a win-win. Thank you, and I'm happy to offer any suggestions or questions if you have them.
Thank you for being here. Questions for Ms. Duprez? Seeing none, we will move to Megan Hannon. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, members of the Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Megan Hannon. I'm the Executive Director of Maine Community Action Partnership, and we support LD 1748. Maine Community Action Partnership is an early and avid supporter of the Invest in Tomorrow package, which, as you know, is the impetus for the two reports from the Department of Health and Human Services presented to you in February and earlier this year. For more than 50 years, community action has served as a dynamic and community-based force in addressing the causes and conditions of poverty throughout Maine and the country. Our 10 community action agencies deliver programs and services for people with low and moderate income, including many of those, and we also serve many of those addressed in this report. I'm proud of our longstanding mission and work to reduce poverty. So I was alarmed to read the statistics in those two LIFT reports, to see so many families with children under poverty level left out of getting assistance from TANF and all of the supports and education and training opportunities that go with it. These supports, if and when done well, are a lifeline for families to leave poverty behind. We know through brain science and gene response that generational poverty changes people. It has been demonstrated that the social and emotional damage to young children, often called adverse childhood events or ACEs, extends into and manifests in their teen and adult years. We see the results in ultimately another generation of poverty. We know that we can stop the cycle. That is why I was so glad to see the proposed changes in the TANF Aspire program in LD 1748. We value our customers' lived experiences, and so should the Aspire program administrators. For that reason, we support the additions of qualitative data and surveys from current and terminated program participants. We know that meeting families where they are, supporting work they are able to do, leads to success for those families by their definition. We know that growing up in poverty is trauma, and as more people move to Maine from war-torn areas of the world, it's more important than ever that state and TANF administering organizations understand and use trauma-informed, culturally and linguistically appropriate language, spaces, and services. We cannot afford to lose families from the program because they were not communicated with appropriately and/or in the correct language. More than violating federal law and family civil rights, it is against everything we should stand for as responsible community organizations. These families are interacting with us because they need help. It is incumbent upon us to deliver the help in the way that they can be received without threat, confusing language, or derision. Finally, I want to remind the committee about a December 29 of 2021 Publica article named "States are hoarding $5.2 billion in welfare funds, even as the need for aid grows." It outlines,
Megan.
thank you. It outlines how several states are saving money. Hoarding is the word they use, while denying people TANF benefits. Maine has a dubious distinction of being one of the 3 states with excess TANF funds, leaving millions in the bank, while, as our own data make clear, families are left no better off than when they join the program. LD 748 ensures that participants have access to the funds they need to enroll in classes, buy books, have childcare, etc., to ensure success. This is not the kind of anti-poverty program we should be running in Maine. The efforts outlined in this bill make important changes that would hopefully help us appropriately spend funds we are given for the purpose of bringing families out of a lifetime of poverty. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Hannan? Seeing none. Welcome, Mariah Gear.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Mariah Gear, and I'm the Moxie case coach at Maine Equal Justice. We're a nonprofit civil legal aid organization working to increase economic security, opportunity, and equity for people in Maine. For the 3.5 years that I've been at Maine Equal Justice, I have been working one-on-one with people in poverty to help them navigate our public benefit systems and to advocate for them when they're unable to get the help that they need. Before coming to this work, I spent 8 years navigating that same system myself as a low-income single parent with 2 children. I earned my bachelor's degree with support from the Parents as Scholars program, and then went on to earn a master's in social work so that I would be better prepared to use my experiences to help improve the lives of others. I'm here today to speak in support of LD 1748 because of the many ways that it would improve people's experiences with navigating public benefit systems, while also establishing clear pathways out of poverty for parents like myself and the people that I work with. As a social worker, I know that research tells us that before an individual can make a change in their lives, they go through stages that start with pre-contemplation and then contemplation. In other words, that person must be able to really envision themselves making the change before they can ever take steps towards it. The goal of the welfare system is to help people move out of poverty. Our job in social services is not just to tell people what to do in order to move out of poverty, it's also to help them become mentally prepared to make those changes. HHS can help people to make changes by no longer being a source of trauma, by providing clear information on pathways that are open to them, and by simplifying the application processes so that people who are just starting to think about changes can more easily see the path forward instead of getting trapped in the minutia. Education was my pathway out of poverty. 11 years ago, when I walked into the Bangor DHHS office to apply for TANF, I told them that I was going to go to college and that I'd heard there was a program that might help me. They put me right on Parents as Scholars, which was vital for my success. There were no hoops to jump through, and no one discouraged me from the path. I knew that education was what I needed, but I was also experiencing a lot of crisis and trauma. I just left a domestic violence situation, and I really don't know how different things may have been if I had received pushback or discouragement rather than support. I've had many clients who are interested in education, whether that be college or a certificate in the trades, who can't figure out how to take that first step. I can connect them to resources, but how many more low-income parents are considering education who never get the chance to talk with someone like me? Maine's workforce could use every one of them, and DHHS is the logical partner in making connections so that people they serve can move out of poverty, while also becoming the answer to our workforce needs. I just want to say that there are many paths out of poverty. They look very different, and right now Parents as Scholars is set up in a very narrow way. It would be wonderful if it would better mirror the HOPE program, which really provides a lot of paths out of poverty. So in closing, I would urge you to vote yes on this legislation. It'll truly make a difference, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah. Questions from Ms. Gear? Seeing none, welcome Piper Stiles.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi. To the honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services, my name is Piper Stiles. I live in Searsport, and I'm testifying in favor of LD 1748. All of the measures proposed in this bill are much needed, but there is one measure in particular that I believe is a keystone measure: trauma-informed services. I'm senior at the University of Maine, Augusta, completing my pre-law justice studies bachelor's with a minor in art and a paralegal certificate. I am a single parent, an organic farmer by trade, an artist, and the list goes on. I also aged out of the foster care system and have been caught in the cycle of poverty and trauma for most of my life. Without detailing painful experiences, I will say that I carry an intimate understanding of the cycle of poverty and trauma, and my experiences empower me to say with confidence that trauma is inherent in and is a compounding factor to poverty. And this fact has been sorely overlooked and underreported. But clinical research is catching on, and the correlations between poverty and trauma have made their way into the social sciences and are now entering more widespread public conversation. Have you ever had to dispute a charge on your credit card and experienced the powerlessness and frustration of being passed around from department to department and kept on hold for a small eternity? Have you ever witnessed or narrowly averted a traffic accident and felt your heart pound awash in that hot, cold rush of adrenaline? Feel the feelings of these commonplace experiences in your body now and hold that thought. I've participated in TANF Aspire programming off and on for the past 9+ years. Many times I have become fed up with the disruptive effect that participation in these programs has had on my life. Imagine you are a Parents of Scholars participant with a course load of 5 classes one semester. Your car is in need of a sticker and some maintenance, and you are a one-parent household with no other transportation options. After dozens of phone calls and emails with FedCap, you are left with the following: confusion as to the rules of accessing car-related support funds, many lost hours over the course of 3 weeks impacting your academic progress, and ultimately, the bill, despite a heavy investment of time and energy, self-advocating to engage available Parents of Scholars funds. This is an experience I had, and it was very triggering. And unfortunately, a standard representation of my experiences with TANF Aspire. Bring back that heavy, oppressive emotion we conjured. This feeling is a glimpse of the relentless internal experience. Thank you. The relentless internal experience of poverty. The practicalities of living in poverty send reasonable, intelligent, and hardworking humans offline into a high-stress state of dysregulation. It saps productivity, it impacts our physical and mental health, and its effects reverberate throughout our lives. This fuels the poverty trauma cycle. Without this shift toward trauma-informed practices, we will be stuck with a cultural narrative within these programs of poverty that robs people of their dignity, health, and self-confidence, keeping people stuck and tragically seeding the poverty trauma cycle anew within our children, as it did in myself as a child. Please vote in favor of LD 1748. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here this afternoon. Welcome, Rebecca Horowitz.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Mayor, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Rebecca Horowitz, and I'm a resident of Bangor. I'm here today to testify in favor of LD 1748. I believe services should be provided to TANF participants with trauma-informed approach that is culturally and linguistically appropriate, and that DHS should collaborate with participants to implement these services. I applied for TANF 5 times in my life. Each time I applied was due to events like losing a job or furthering my education. The first time I applied was when I divorced my husband after years of abuse. At that time, I was completing my associate's degree, and went from living or having his economic support to living on student loans. I needed help to cover the bills for me and my son, who was 3 at the time, and diagnosed with developmental disabilities and a congenital defect. I had always felt like somebody who could support herself, but I had experienced trauma and divorce, and I was lost at that time. A traumatized mind can't function under so much stress. Every time I applied for TANF, I'd explain my situation. I got no empathy from DHHS staff. They would say they couldn't help me because I received too much money from student loans, or excluded my son from the household because he received an SSI dependent benefit. So they would use policy and income guidelines to say no. Even if I wasn't eligible for TANF, DHHS could have referred me to a Partners for Peace, a domestic violence resource center, and a member of the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence. I never even thought of contacting them at that time, but they could have given me community resources and helped me provide counseling and support groups. Now I'm a full-time student achieving a bachelor's degree in social work at the University of Maine with plans to further my education. I'm an intern at Partners for Peace, and I know the value of a trauma-informed approach, which is one that takes a person's individual needs seriously and meets those needs with compassion and empathy. I worry about survivors who may need to find access to TANF. Many of them have been economically dependent on their abusers and need a different source of income to move on. I have been on and off TANF as I've worked to finish my associate's and bachelor's degree. For the most part, it's been a struggle. When I needed TANF to help me, they didn't. By the time my workers, thank you. By the time my workers got back in touch with me, I had already resolved the situation on my own. And I was beyond needing. It never felt like anyone cared how I was doing in school, just that I was going. We can do better for parents in Maine, and we need to. That's why I support LD 1748 and the requirement that DHHS listen to the voices and experiences of TANF participants to implement trauma-informed services. We know what works and what doesn't work, and we know how Maine can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Horowitz? Seeing none, welcome Sarah Halsey.
Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Sarah Halsey. I'm a resident of Augusta, and I'm here today to testify in favor of LD 1748. I'm a full-time student getting my bachelor's degree. My long-term goal is to become a licensed alcohol and drug counselor so I can help my community. There's a huge need in Maine for committed and compassionate people to join this field. I've lost many loved ones in the last few years who desperately needed help to get sober but couldn't find the resources. I've worked hard to be active in my recovery and get where I am today, and I've done this despite my participation in the Aspire program. Instead of supporting me, this program caused me stress, anxiety, and trauma in the last several years. People in this program need trauma-informed support, which is the opposite of the culture that it exists now. When I first got into Aspire, I was in the early stages of my substance use recovery. I was focusing all my energy on my treatment and caring for my kids. My doctor and surgeon wrote letters to FedCap saying they did not recommend that I work because I needed stability to focus on my recovery and that I had a chronic injury. But a few months later, FedCap's doctor looked at my medical records and said, in her opinion, I was able to work. She'd never even met me, and she dismissed the recommendations of the providers who knew me. After that, FedCap said I had 1 week to put my daughter in childcare and start applying for jobs. They threatened that if I didn't, I could be sanctioned or lose my only income. The sudden disruption and pressure from FedCap was a huge hit to my recovery and a strain on my mental health. I was forced to go into FedCap's office to attend mindless workshops and sit in a computer.
Sarah, you're on mute. You're off now. Go ahead, continue.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
All right. The environment was toxic. I found a job as soon as possible to avoid being there. When I started working, FedCap asked for proof of every single doctor's appointment or counseling session I went to so they could count my hours. They threatened that if I didn't do enough hours, they couldn't pay for my daughter's daycare or that they'd cut off my TANF. FedCap invaded my privacy and asked intrusive questions about my health, recovery, and mental health all the time, but they never used that information to support me. They treated me like a number. All that mattered was how many hours that I did, not whether those hours were helping me move forward in life. I finally decided to go to college to become a certified alcohol and drug counselor. FedCap never even told me education was an option in Aspire. Then I had to fight for support for my education. I was forced to work while doing full-time school and not granted
30 seconds, Sarah.
Thank you. Not granted study hours while caring for my children. It shouldn't have been so hard and stressful for me to get where I am now. TANF and Aspire should provide trauma-informed services to all parents so nobody has to experience what I did. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
And thank you for being here today. Questions from Ms. Halsey? Seeing none, we would welcome Stephanie Eglinton.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Stephanie Eglinton, and I am Executive Director of the Maine Children's Alliance and a member of the Invest in Tomorrow Coalition. I offer testimony in support of LD 1748 to advance needed reforms to improve the effectiveness of the TANF Aspire program. We all benefit when parents achieve economic stability and are contributing to the economy through good jobs that pay a livable wage. Effective anti-poverty programs increase the chances that children grow up outside the harmful effects of poverty and have a greater chance to meet their full potential. Of the 33,000 children in Maine living in poverty in 2019, over 12,600 of those children were living in deep poverty, with family incomes below $12,875 for a family of four. TANF is intended to ensure that children do not go without basic essentials. It fills gaps during difficult times and provides parents with the tools they need to get and maintain a job, heat their homes, pay their rent, and put food on the table for their families. I would also like to speak a moment to the connection between child welfare and family economic security. A strong and effective TANF program provides an opportunity to address poverty as a risk factor for child maltreatment. Over 3/4 of child maltreatment substantiations in 2020 in Maine were neglect, defined as a deprivation of essential needs. Risk factors are the conditions that make it more likely that child maltreatment will occur. Poverty and social isolation are two of those risk factors. Protective factors are the conditions that provide a buffer to stressors on families. These include having basic needs like food, housing, healthcare, and education, and the presence of strong social supports. Research has shown that these conditions make it less likely that child maltreatment will occur. It's important to note that almost half, 47% of Maine's families assessed by Child Protective Services in 2020 were single parent households experiencing economic stressors. We are pleased that the Department of Health and Human Services has taken steps to increase capacity and accountability with additional Aspire positions, and we applaud their commitment to a whole family approach where there's no wrong door for families to access services, as well as their commitment to provide services that are trauma-informed and culturally and linguistically appropriate. I think these stories have spoken probably more effectively, but let me just repeat. Okay, the three data points in the most recent LIFT report that are bring up the point that this TANF program is not meeting the objective of lifting families out of poverty. Only 22% of families with children in poverty are getting help from TANF. 82% of families leaving TANF in 2020 were still in poverty when they left. 75% of parents were not connected to education and training beyond high school. So again, the last point is really happy to see that parent feedback would be included in collecting survey and qualitative data to improve the program. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Question from Representative Zager.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Ms. Eglinton, thank you so much for testifying and connecting these dots. I was looking at a paper that was cited by an earlier testifier, which looked at the trend over time of TANF, the stockpile of TANF available within Maine. There's it's a sort of V-shaped. In other words, we had been, as a state, been utilizing those funds until about 2014. And then it has just, stockpiled as has been reported and testified to. In your capacity, do you know what, does the Maine Children Alliance know why that happened or what happened in around 2014 that has made it so that those funds are not flowing?
I'd probably be best if I could just circle back to you on an answer for that. But yeah, we've been very concerned to see that state government is not fully spending what's available for them that is targeted to low-income families in Maine. But to the exact what was happening at that time of the bottom of the V, I'd have to get back to you on that.
I appreciate. I realize I kind of put you on the spot there, yeah, if you do have additional information I can provide for the work session, that would be terrific. But thank you so much for being here.
Happy to do that.
Senator Moore.
One of the questions, thank you very much, and Stephanie for the information. I'm just trying to remember, do you remember what year the FedCap won the contract to take over the TANF and the Aspire program? I can't remember. Somebody?
Tara, do you know? Yeah, somebody on the call probably does.
Yeah, that's something we can check into. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands up, thank you for being here today. And we'll move to Tara Williams. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, distinguished members of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Tara Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association for the Education of Young Children. At Maine AEYC, we focus on early care and education and how to best support young children from birth to age 8. Our work with local, state, and national partners has taught us that there are some key components needed in policy and practice for children's well-being. These include centering lived experience in the creation of policy, having single points of access to simplify systems, and the implementation of culturally and linguistically responsive and trauma-informed approaches, where the focus is on the needs of the whole family. LD 1748, which I'm here to testify in support of, I think I forgot to mention that, outlines next steps to improve opportunities for Maine parents to build a secure future. There's a few parts of this that we want to highlight that we are excited to see. One of those is the qualitative survey and consultation with current and former participants. This is a perfect example of how we honor and recognize the lived experience when we're setting up policies and trying to make them better. We think it will go a long way to help make sure that the program is more culturally responsive, more trauma informed. Another important aspect is the exploring the possibility of simplifying the application process for several education programs, including Parents as Scholars, the HOPE program, which has been mentioned, and others like the Competitive Skills Scholarship Program. Also, this bill is excellent in that it's really supporting the untapped potential of Parents as Scholars. We know that if more parents can pursue their education, they can obtain better jobs and financial security for their families, and really hope that this helps influence the department to be able to assist recipients of TANF who are looking to join the Parents as Scholars program to get access to remedial services, financial assistance, Aspire services, all of those things. And then I think the area that we would bring some expertise to, and I want to make sure to not forget to mention, is that In Parents as Scholars, it's really important that we count both the hours enrolled in classes and the hours needed for studying as part of calculating the hours that a family needs for childcare. This really is a no-brainer. It's a perfect example of how a program is not currently centering lived experience and could be doing that. I heard a previous testimony this afternoon that referenced her being told she had 1 week to find childcare. This isn't realistic in the experience of parents in Maine. Okay, thank you. And so I really am encouraged to see in this bill that it's asking our programs to consider childcare needs as part of workforce training and education programs for parents. And so just to wrap it up, I think it's important we remember that for healthy development, including the cognitive and social emotional learning of young children, they need to have their basic physiological needs, food, water, shelter, and their basic safety needs met. And remembering that children in Maine can thrive when we make sure programs are responsive to their needs and the needs of their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Questions from Ms. Williams? Seeing none, thanks for being here today. Concluding testimony today, unless there's someone in the attendees that would like to provide testimony, raise your hand if you do. Concluding testimony is Kelly Grindle. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Mayor, and honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Kelly Grindle, and I'm a resident of Bangor, Maine, and I'm here today to testify in favor of LD 1748. I am currently a student at UMA majoring in justice studies with aspirations to become a paralegal or mediator after graduation. I'm also a board member with Panquist CAP and the UMA Student Conduct Board, but most importantly, I'm a mother of 3 and a wife. Recently, in the midst of dealing with COVID-19, my life took a turn for the worse, and I realized the stress was taking a hold of my husband, and he started abusing alcohol. We were suddenly faced with an extended time of him being away from home and in recovery, and with him being the breadwinner of the family, I didn't know what to do. I needed money to survive, and working simply wasn't an option for me. My 3 children all have unique special abilities, and I've stayed home for the last 3 years to focus on their needs. My oldest daughter is 17 years old, and she's a junior at Bangor High School and holds a part-time job at Walmart. She suffers from depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation. My youngest daughter is 7 years old and a first-grade student at Downey School, as well as a member of the Boys and Girls Club. She suffers from ADHD combined type and oppositional defiant disorder. And last but not least, my son. He is 3 years old, and he's been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, level 2 with accompanying language disorder, as well as EOE, which is an autoimmune disorder of the esophagus. During this challenging, traumatic time in my life, I received ongoing pressure from FedCap to do more work activities, on top of being a part-time student and a mother. As a result of this, I'm feeling burnt out, depressed, constantly anxious, and more importantly, I've had to rehash my recent trauma over and over again. I've tried repeatedly to explain to FedCap that people don't fit in a one-size-fits-all box, and some people have legitimate reasons why they can't work. However, because I live below the poverty limit, my husband shouldn't be allowed to have the opportunity to recover. Because I live below the poverty limit, I'm not allowed to focus on my kids' special needs. Because I live under the poverty level, I'm not allowed to take a break or practice any type of self-care because I need to do more. I myself am diagnosed with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and having to repeat my trauma isn't allowing me time to heal. I've been constantly embarrassed and made to feel like less of a person when I reach out to FedCap to try to discuss my situation. I've had to repeat my trauma to multiple people at FedCap organization in less than a year of being on the program and belittled repeatedly in the process. It has
30 seconds, Kelly.
Thank you. It has to stop. In conclusion, I'm here today supporting LD 1748 because there's not a one-size-fits-all box for all the needy families in Maine. And because living under the poverty level with disabilities doesn't make you less of a person or give you less rights to care for yourself and your family than those who are wealthier. We should have the same rights to take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, and mentally as other people do. Thank you for your time and consideration.
And thank you for being here today. Questions for Ms. Grindle? Seeing none. I see Allison Perkins' name. I'm not sure who is here to provide testimony.
This
Can
is
you
Michelle
unmute
Gardner.
yourself?
I'm trying to
Hi.
fix my, sorry.
Hi, that's quite all right. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Hi. Did
I
you,
saw
you
guys
have
on
test,
Thursday, but yes,
you
I
have
will.
testimony to deliver?
Yes.
Welcome. Go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Michelle Ganya, and I'm here in favor of LD 1748. Good afternoon, Senator Claxton, Representative Meyer, and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. Again, my name is Michelle Ganya. I live in Winslow. I'm a single mom to 3 special needs boys. They're 16, and 7. And I currently work full-time as a residential community worker in the mental health field. I was helped with support of DHHS with getting my MERT-C and currently working to get my associate's degree. I'm also a first gen in my family to graduate from high school and college. And I'm extremely grateful for the help. For a couple of years, I was on the TANF education extension, and I'm working towards my degree in social work. I'm currently transitioned into the HOPE program, and I am seeing that the HOPE program does get back to my phone calls quickly and does really show empathy and support very quickly. The HOPE program continues to provide support through school. They help me with a laptop. They help me with internet and childcare and transportation. They do help with car repairs and such. And with HOPE's support and emergency rental assistance, I was able to repair my credit and upgrade to a more reliable family vehicle, which is awesome. And I did not need a cosigner, so really proud of myself. This support has helped me get through school with HOPE program currently, and I know many families can't afford to keep themselves afloat. I was in that predicament for a while, just really scared if I was going to lose my TNF at any point in time or be sanctioned. And there were times I couldn't reach them via phone. It was very unclear of what I needed to be doing to report my hours. I was threatened in fear of sanctions, which means no money. I wouldn't have any money to support my family or even have fear of losing the roof over our head, which our rent is $1,250 a month. I would submit requests that were urgent and wouldn't hear back from them for a couple weeks. I would have to reach out to their supervisors and go up the chain up to their supervisors and reach out to their email or phone and just wonder if I would get a phone call back or anything. I really felt disrespected and worried. I just really think they should help with trauma. I've learned a lot about trauma and poverty and mental health in my coursework. And this is the way they are disrespectful and such is not a way to be. This is not how to work with people with trauma. And I really hope that the programs are better for participants, workers, and help DHHS achieve this to be better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here, Michelle. Questions for Ms. Ganya? Seeing none.
Thank you.
I believe there is a Susan Corrales. Susan?
I'm trying to promote another Allison Perkins, which should be her.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Welcome.
Welcome. Good afternoon, Senator Cox, Representative Myers, and member of Health and Human Services Committee of Maine Legislative. My name is Susan Corrales, and I live in Vassarboro, Maine. I am a mother of 2, and I am a small business owner and a senior at UMA for Justice Studies. I first came in contact with TANF when I was 16 years old. I was a teenage mother in Waterville, where I attended the Maine Children's Home for Little Wonders. I had successfully graduated from high school with a high school diploma and a 2-year-old son, where I went to college in Lewiston, Maine, where I independently gained an associate's degree in criminal justice. And I started working in Central Maine with at-risk teenagers who faced a lot of barriers with homelessness in Central Maine area. I came back in contact with TANF when I was about 25 years old, and I came out of a domestic violence situation And I had a second child and a low-paying job working with these teenagers, and I wasn't able to fully suffice my my income. And so I had resigned from my job to take care of my daughter, who had a lot of health problems with allergies and skin disease. In that time, I took the time to go back to school at UMA, where they had referred me to TANF for some resources that I needed at the time to support me while I was doing school full time. I was pretty optimistic. I feel like I've overcome a lot as a teenage mother in Maine. I feel like whatever opportunity comes my way, I've always push and be very resourceful. And my first orientation at TANF, I was very it was very uplifting. I was very optimistic. It was exactly the kind of support that I needed to be successful while attending UMA in Augusta. My expectation was a couple of days short-lived, where I start experiencing different kind of systematic flaw with FedCap. And I felt like I came in, I thought it was going to be clear and straight to the point. I had the energy, I had the drive, and I had a lot of flaws with staff that wasn't really clearly, properly addressed. A lot of the flaws that happened, there wasn't anything on my side, and I had clearly proven that a lot of these things
Susan,
that had happened wasn't my fault. And there was no one at FedCap, even the supervisors, who would take accountability for the flaw that would happen. One instance had happened, I had a flaw where I had missed a meeting that I didn't know I was signed up for, and I was sanctioned and lose my food stamps. So no, not only was I broke and stressed out, I had no food as well because I missed an appointment that I had no physical appointment date for. And so I want to share real quick a traumatizing experience that I had at FedCap, where I was verbally assaulted in front of my children. And it felt like there was nobody that was held accountable. And I feel like I was basically string along the system. And I feel like I should have came out of the program with a 2-year mark, and now it's marking me at a 4-year mark instead of the 2-year mark that I had originally planned my goal to complete the program at FedCap.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. She's left us. We appreciate your testimony today. That appears to conclude testimony on 1748, unless I am missing anyone. We do a quick search for hands. Molly Bogart, do you have your hand up? Bear with me for a second here. Okay. Oh, here she is. Welcome, Molly Bogart.
Thank you. I did have my hand up. We have testimony neither for nor against, really providing some additional information. So appreciate the opportunity. My name is Molly Bogart. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Department of Health and Human Services. And again, thanks for the opportunity to provide some comments. We certainly appreciate and share the goal of improving the existing reports and programs, and value the opportunity to stay at the table with the committee and stakeholders on improving our programming to better meet the needs of participants. We've had a few opportunities to discuss the amendment to this bill with stakeholders, and appreciate that they've received and accepted many of our edits and feedback. As you often hear us say, we also need to be sure that program changes that are made align with the federal framework that grants these dollars in the TANF block grant. And we understand that there's a willingness to continue discussions around this dynamic and ensure that any needed clarity is achieved in this amendment to make sure that we are not the department's concerns are addressed there. In addition, I wanted to offer some quick feedback, and then I can also answer some of the questions that came up earlier. With respect to sections 1, 2, and 3, specifically around improving the qualitative data around the LIFT report, we just want to recognize that participant surveys can often, they provide significant and valuable feedback when they're administered correctly, and that appropriate administration would require an outside entity and associated resources to ensure that the survey results are representative and properly aggregated and analyzed in a way that is meaningful to the department and the committee. That's just not expertise that we have in-house, and we value that feedback and wanted to flag that. Additionally, there are some sections of this bill that would require additional funding from federal block grants. So we want to make note of that. Otherwise, we appreciate the opportunity to continue discussing some of the portions of this bill and all of the perspectives and stories that we heard earlier this afternoon. I did want to answer a few questions. One, I believe Senator Moore asked when FedCap began, and the decision to contract the Aspire program out was made in 2014, and the contract was awarded and FedCap began as the provider of those services in 2016. And Representative Zager asked a bit about the trajectory of spending in the TANF block grant. And I think it's important to recognize that a number of policy decisions were made by the legislature and by the previous administration to decrease precipitously in some situations the TANF spending. And so we can, discuss more what policy decisions those were, but I think it's important to recognize that there were policy changes that aligned with that decrease in spending that, have that impacted the TANF spending overall. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and certainly can bring some more information to the work session, and look forward to continuing the conversation with folks around the table.
Thank you, Ms. Bogart. Questions for Molly? Yes, Representative Zager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for shedding light. Does is one of the policy decisions the limitation of lifetime limit of 5 years?
You're on mute, Molly.
It's been a while since I've done that. Thank you. I believe that was established after 2010, but I would have to confirm that and get back to you.
And is that money, is that the origin of that federal, or is that is federal money that it comes to Maine and we're not dispersed?
Sure. So the TANF block grant is all federal dollars. There is a requirement for maintenance of effort in state dollars. We often talk about state match. The dynamic is a little bit different, but you can sort of think about it that way. So there is a maintenance of effort in a state general fund appropriation that participates in the TANF program, but TANF block grant funds are federal dollars that come to us through the federal government.
We have to access it by investing some state money. I get that. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence.
Seeing no additional hands up with questions for Ms. Bogart or in the attendees list, I will close the public hearing on 1748 and ask the committee if they have any requests for additional info to our analyst, Anna Broom. Seeing none, Anna. With that, it is 2:30. We've got 2 work sessions ahead of us, and it looks like lots of people waiting to participate in that. Should we take a 5-minute break? And Senator Claxton's saying 10. So it is 2:30. I will see you at 2:40.
So good afternoon. We're back to resuming our schedule for the day. And we'll begin with work session first on 343 and then on 1722. So 343 would be Representative Talbot Ross. And I'm not seeing her here yet, but she's coming. It's that time of year when the legislative calendar involves having legislators be multiple places at once. The ability to bilocate would certainly be an advantage. Okay, we've been joined by Representative Talbot Ross. She's in the wormhole. Good morning, good afternoon, Representative. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. It is afternoon, isn't it? Yep.
It is afternoon, yes. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We're going to have a discussion about LD 343, and I understand you have an amendment. I think, though, we'll start with Sam and hear what he has to say. Is that the right order for you, Sam?
Sounds good to me. We'll go ahead and share my screen if that's okay, Senator.
Please.
All right. So this is, actually, I'm going to just a little bit bigger. So this is LD 343. This is an act to set aside funds from federal block grants for certain communities. As originally drafted, the bill required DHHS to annually set aside 20% of each federal block grant it receives for the most vulnerable communities in the state, and at least 12% of every federal block grant for federally recognized Indian nations, tribes, and bands in the state. So the public hearing took place back last March, so it was almost a year ago now. A work session was held on May 20th and the bill was tabled. There were a number of commenters. Some commenters noted a significant percentage of certain block grants support state lines that carry out public health work, particularly in the maternal and child health grant. There were some concerns over potential cuts in current grantees. Commenters testified about generational trauma and associated health problems within tribal communities, as well as the importance in allowing tribes to self-determine how public funds will be used. Commenters testified about the need for improved communication between tribal communities in the state. It was stated that block grants often involve advisory committees that help determine priorities for funding, and those often lack diversity, including of tribal members. DHHS expressed concerns about the difficulty of defining vulnerable communities. DHHS noted that under federal regulation, federally recognized tribes can apply to the US HHS to administer their own TANF funds, and if approved, would use a portion of the state TANF funds, but that absent such approval, it was not federally allowable for a state to delegate administration to a tribal government. DHHS noted that some block grants have federally required set-asides, and commenters described the health impacts of systemic racism in individuals and on communities. There was, again, quite a bit more testimony. I tried to summarize some of the larger points that were in multiple pieces of testimony. Drafting issues, there were some questions around, as regards the 20% for vulnerable communities. It wasn't clear exactly how those funds would be administered, and also about whether or not the 20% would include tribal members, or if that was separate and apart from the set aside for tribal members. So there is some legislative history here. LD 1134, which was an act to set aside funds from federal block grants for certain communities, was considered in the 129th. There were a couple versions of the bill. There was a majority and a minority amendment, but this was one of those bills that ultimately died at the conclusion of the 129th. That was the COVID session, the first one. So DHHS receives 8 block grants. I've listed them there. And as a reminder, a federal block grant is a grant that comes from the federal government, but is less restrictive in terms of some of the requirements of the grant, and it provides generally a state or a locality with some more leeway and flexibility in administering those funds. There is a preliminary fiscal note. It indicates a potential current biennium increase to the general fund. So that is right there. There is an amendment, and Representative Talbot-Ross, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to go through it or if you would prefer to go through it. I will put it up here on the screen now.
Kind, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I can walk through this. After several months of meetings between members of the Tribal Public Health District's leadership and also working with the Department of Health and Human Services, I think this amendment really shows a compromise to try to look at a number of different factors that I can walk you through. But it will focus really on one of those block grants, one out of the 8, which is where the genesis of the original legislation came from, the Maternal and Child Health Services block grant. What we have come to together on is for the department to work in partnership with the Tribal Public Health District representatives and representatives from the Permanent Commission on the Status of Racial, Indigenous, and Tribal Populations in order to look at a number of different things. They're listed 1 through 7. The reason for the change in it is because we really need to kind of drill down information on the block grant to understand what it is that we should move forward in terms of any formula that would come up to set a percentage for set aside. We also know that we need to define the populations, the vulnerable populations that are listed in the grant. And we really need to better understand collectively what that landscape looks like in the amount of money received by block grant, who decides on where that money goes, what is the impact to these communities before we go to the next step, which may be a set aside, percentage of set aside. So we're going to ask the question about the total amount of the grant. We want to know the entities and the programs that's funded by the grant. Want to know specifically the populations who are being served, what the decision-making process is from the department to determine what entities get the block grant funding and how much each of those entities receive. We want to better understand the impacts and the outcomes in the population served. If you think about the disparities that we see year after year after year, we're trying to ascertain with the block grant money and the proliferation of these disparities, what are we using this money for, and what is the outcome and the impact for those communities if there's this continual legacy of disparity. We really wanted to find, I think this particular grant says most vulnerable population, but we don't know what that means. Who are those? What's the demographics on that? And then we should be able to tell what gaps in funding for that population are still present in the system, even with the block grant funding. So we hope that the committee agrees that instead of moving forward with a percentage of set aside at this time, we should step back, work together to try to answer some of these questions on just one of the grants, and then use that information to move forward. Therefore, you'll see in section 2 that there's a report back to this committee no later than February 1st. So there would be a report from the partnership that tries to answer some of those questions, along with presenting you with any recommendations to move forward. This is not a given that the set-asides would even be necessary. We want to really work together to find out what it is that should be done in order to, again, really mitigate those generational disparities that we see keep showing up. So we'll start with this grant and see where it takes us. That is really the spirit of the amendment, and I will say the spirit of the work between tribal representatives and the department and myself as a bill sponsor. And we hope that it's the spirit of us coming together to answer these questions that the committee will see its way to supporting this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Talbot Ross. So with that information, both from Sam Seneff and Representative Talbot Ross, are there any questions from the committee about this bill? Yes, Representative Javner.
Thank you very much, Senator Claxton. Thank you, Representative Talbot Ross. I can really appreciate this amendment. I have a couple questions. However, I could just see me, as a department, having this set before me and trying to really ascertain in my mind what this, vulnerable population is really going to be as we move forward with, really picking that out of the pot, if I can put it that way. And it just seems so subjective that I find that it is, I myself, I'm not even in the department. I can just already see, what is this? And also too, I just have a question about the time, I remember working, this very similar bill that the federal block grant that we worked last session in the 129th, and hearing from tribal representatives how much reporting they had received, a lot of reporting from the department. I don't know particularly if there's anybody in the participants list or the attendees list that can speak to that question of what it is that they have already received. I remember especially Ms. Sakabason speaking on it, how they had much information, but really felt like they were left out of the loop. There were a lot of things that they were said that was going to happen that never happened. I'm just really concerned with that I don't want to see that happen again. I don't want to see them feel as if we're going through one more process and not really glean the information that is needed to move forward. So if you could just address a couple of those, Representative Talbot Ross, I'd be really appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Representative, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the meetings and discussions that we've been having since this bill was carried over. Both Ms. Sakabason and Chief Sabatis were present for those meetings. We also included Molly Bogart from the Department of Health and Human Services. This information in the resolution is not information that they know of. They helped write this resolve. So we've come together to pose this set of questions, if you will. And the tribes have been part at the table and agree to this, the language in this resolution and the process. I will say that those discussions, Representative, also included providers who may have seen a decrease in their allotment from the grant if this bill had gone through the way that it did. Because taking the 12% or taking the 20% that's in the original bill would have impacted the system. Someone would have then not gotten their current allocation. So we made sure to include those voices in the discussions that we had. And that's really one of the other reasons, Representative, that we're taking this step. We do not want to see anyone lose the ability to continue to serve communities that they serve as a result of the bill without real careful thought about what that impact is going to look like. So this that you see today, again, I use the word, the spirit of what is before you, because we really have tried to come together and figure out what the right first step would be in looking at this one particular grant. As Sam said in the analysis, there are 8 that the department receives. This one we thought rose above, and we could all come together on, slow the process down, and really start to drill down some of the answers, and then come back to this committee and let you know what we found out, and let you know if we really believe that doing the set-asides makes the most sense. I think you had another question before that. In terms of the definition of vulnerable populations, we join you, Representative, in trying to figure out what is the demographic for that? Who are these people? And we really need to understand. It's so generic that I couldn't tell you who it is. I don't think the department can tell you. There are categories that seem to fit, but I couldn't tell you specifically. So one of our charges in this resolve is to find out what are the demographics according to the grants and how they're being applied. What is the population being served? So I thank you, Representative, for that line of questioning.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Representative Perry?
Yes, thank you. I was wondering if a representative of the tribe and Molly, if they're there, could come in and just speak to that.
I don't see Molly being available, and I don't see a tribal representative that I'm familiar with. If somebody is here who wants to speak and want to put your hand up, that would be great. But not seeing anybody, I can't bring anybody.
Mr. Chair and Representative Perry, in all due respect, because we all came together on this, everyone signed off on the resolve. They did not see the need to come and reiterate what I'm presenting to you. So they kind of thought that we had this by me speaking and making sure the committee understood that we've done this together.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments? So I'm not seeing any. Yes, Representative Zager?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to make a motion.
Please.
I move that LD 343 ought to pass as amended.
Is there a second for that?
I second.
That was Representative Perry seconding? No? Who was that? Was that Representative Perry seconding?
It
Yes,
was.
okay.
Representative Javner has her hand up, Senator.
I saw that. I saw that. So now there's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. Representative Javner.
Thank you, Chair. I would really just appreciate 5 minutes for a corner caucus, please.
You asked, you get it. So that's the way we're working the committee. So we will reconvene in about 5 minutes, and we'll rejoin when Representative Javner turns on her video. That'll be our clue that we're back in session.
See, we only took 2 minutes.
You're faster. Yeah.
Now we're waiting on Senator Claxton, who was going to give you that 5.
Takes longer to get into another portal than it does to discuss the issue.
Okay, so we're back from a brief break. Representative Jeffner, do you have your hand up again or still? Or?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I just, could I have the motion repeated, please?
Yes, the motion was ought to pass as amended. The amendment being the substituted language that we saw from Representative Talbot Ross. Any other questions? So the motion on the floor is ought to pass as amended. It's been made and seconded. Not seeing any comments. I would ask our clerk to gather the vote.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Zager.
Yes.
Representative Zager, yes. Representative Lemlin.
Yes.
Representative Lemlin, yes. Representative Stover.
Yes.
Representative Stover, yes. Senator Baldacci. Senator Baldacci is absent. Representative Perry.
Yes.
Representative Perry, yes. Representative Madigan.
Yes.
Representative Madigan, yes. Representative Craven.
Yes.
Representative Craven, yes. Representative Connor. Representative Connor is absent. Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Griffin, yes. Representative Javner.
Yes.
Representative Javner, yes. Senator Moore.
Yes.
Senator Moore, yes. Representative Meyer.
Yes.
Representative Meyer, yes. Senator Claxton.
Yes.
Senator Claxton, yes.
So that's unanimous of those present with several people absent. So
I just want to say thank you to everyone, Senator. Thank you all. Really.
Thanks for work. Thanks for your work on getting to a common understanding. We love those kinds of happenings, especially this time of year. So well done.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. All right. So we got a couple of breaks and now we're ready to move on to consideration of LD 1722, for which there is an amendment also. And I will defer to Sam and his expertise.
I'm gonna go ahead and screen share again. All right, and I'm gonna make it just a little bigger here. All right, so this is LD 1722. This is another carryover. This is an act to ensure access to all paths to recovery for persons affected by opioids using money obtained through litigation against opioid manufacturers. So this bill, as originally drafted, directed that all funds awarded through opioid litigation and settlements to the opioid and substance abuse abatement fund administered by the Attorney General for the purpose of remediating and addressing substance use crisis in Maine through prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. The funds may not be used to supplant federal funding or state appropriations directed towards those purposes or funds received from prior opioid litigation and settlements or court orders. The bill also established the Maine Opioid and Substance Use Abatement Advisory Commission to review opioid and substance use related information. and to determine how opioid and substance use abatement funds are to be spent to carry out the purpose of the fund. It required the Attorney General to convene at least twice annually a stakeholder group to develop and review performance indicators and to develop and provide recommendations concerning disbursements and allocations from the fund to recommend to the Commission. Also required that the Attorney General award funds as directed to the Commission in annually report and provide information about funds received and funds expended to the Joint Standing Committee of Jurisdiction. There is an amendment, and I will pull it up in just a second. And just for some background, it replaces the original bill, and part of that is because a lot has happened between when this bill was originally proposed and now. There has been settlement, and there are memorandums of understanding that lay out some of the things that were originally anticipated in the bill as originally drafted. This public hearing was held on May 21st, 2021. Commenters emphasized the need for inclusion of the Recovery Committee and other diverse voices on any commission, including advocating for harm reduction and representation from geographically diverse areas. It was suggested that settlement funds be protected from diversion to the general fund. It was suggested the bill should account better for reinvestment strategies. And the Attorney General had suggested that some language that use the term recognized path be replaced with evidence-based path. I don't have much of an analysis because in effect, the bill as originally written kind of became moot. But I did provide you with what is probably more useful, which are the links to the memorandums of understanding, as well as the settlement agreements. So you have them for your records, easy at hand. So I'm gonna pull up the sponsors amendment. I am not sure if Representative Warren is here.
She is, and she's in the wormhole. Will be here shortly.
Okay. So I'll wait for her to go through this.
Welcome, Representative Warren.
Thank you, Senator. Good to see you.
We just got through Sam's analysis in case you didn't catch all of it and got to the point of wanting to talk about an amendment.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sam, would you be willing to walk through the amendment? And then I do have 2 changes to the amendment due to recent conversations, as in right before 2 o'clock, that I'd like to share with the committee.
So yes, I will. I'm happy to do that. So as I said before, this amendment reflects the fact that there has been settlement reached and memorandums of understanding signed very recently, and this reflects those new developments. There is an emergency preamble on this amendment. So the first thing this amendment does is it adds some language to in Title V to make it clear that there is money that comes into the state through litigation can be deposited into a fund, and that this is under the purview of the Attorney General. It's just a cross reference here. So this new section here states that the Attorney General shall work with the Treasurer of State to deposit identified revenue or money received as a result of any court order or agreement resulting from litigation or settlement with an opioid manufacturer, research association, or other person in the industry relating to claims made or prosecuted by the state of Maine into the Maine Recovery Fund created by the Maine State Subdivision MOU, an agreement regarding use of settlement funds. And then there's other language here, and it's very kind of long, and that is for a reason. So this is the memorandum of understanding that actually establishes this fund into which the monies will be deposited. And the reason why this is a kind of long reference here is to make it clear that it's referencing the MOU as it exists on January 26, 2022. And the reason for that being so specific is to avoid any confusion if at a later date the MOU is amended. So it makes it clear that it's referencing this static document. There's also language here that talks about the Maine Recovery Council. So this is the group, again, this is actually created by the MOU. The MOU lays out requirements for 11 members of this council. So this council is the group that is going to help direct how these funds are going to be used. So we have some definitions here. So the first is approved uses. Again, the approved uses are actually laid out in the MOU itself, and it's quite long. So if you look through the list of approved uses, they're laid out in a fairly great degree of detail. And this simply says that approved uses means those uses as laid out in that MOU. The Maine Recovery Fund, again, referencing the recovery fund created per the MOU. And the council. So the council consists of 11 members that are described in the MOU. And the MOU also says the legislature can also add 4 more members if they wish to. So what this does is it lays out those 4 additional members who are not accounted for with specificity in the MOU. So this is the ones that the legislature may choose. So those 4 additional members are members representing a nonprofit community-based provider of mental health treatment that's appointed by the speaker. Member representing the harm reduction community, also appointed by the speaker. A medical professional with direct experiencing provided MAT that's appointed by the president. And a member representing reentry supports for currently and formerly incarcerated individuals and their families appointed by the president. There's also language here that states that in making these appointments, the speaker and the president will endeavor to select individuals that reflect Maine's diversity in terms of racial, ethnic, gender, and indigenous demographics. Some kind of general language around vacancies. So vacancies shall be filled in the manner of original appointments. There's reimbursement language here. So this is allows for expenses plus $50 a day. This is the general language that you would see when a council or an advisory group is established. So that is the amendment. And I know that the Attorney General is here and Gordon Smith is here, who can help you with any questions you have, particularly about, I think, the MOU, which is what this is all based on. And I did also want to say, and I know Representative Warren has 2 changes. We are checking, and I made some calls this morning with Luke, and he is working to verify with folks in finance to make sure that having that fund established in the MOU and not in statute is sufficient, and that we don't need any additional references in statute. So we are just double checking that. If it turns out that we do need it, it's easy enough to put that in statute. But as written, it references the creation of that fund, which is, as I read it, created in the MOU itself. So a little kind of nitpicky there, and I can explain it again if folks need to hear it again, but just wanted to raise that.
Thank you, Sam. So let's go back to the sponsor and ask, you said you had a couple of changes.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, and thank you, Sam, for all of your work on this. So thank you, committee, for the opportunity to present this to you today. One of the things that's happened, as we all know, and I don't need to go through this because the Attorney General has briefed all of you, is that the Attorney General got us, all of us, a lot of what we wanted in the MOU. And so he's done great work, and I know it's his staff as well. And I just really want to thank him for all of the time that he's also spent with myself and the allies that I'm working with on this bill in helping us to then craft this bill in a way that sits up next to the MOU, but doesn't in any way interfere with the MOU. And that's what we've worked really hard together to do. And so what I wanted to do was as we've tried to figure this out, we have two more things that we'd like to just strip from the bill that you just saw. They're pretty simple. I'll start with the easiest, and it's section 4, where it references reimbursement. We really feel like the folks who are on this council who aren't there representing either a state agency or a nonprofit that they're being paid by should receive some sort of compensation. These are the folks with lived experience of either being previously incarcerated or be in long-term recovery. But it's very clear in the MOU that there can't be compensation for serving on this recovery council. So the Attorney General has talked about how this also should really be something that the council itself decides. So I would like to just strike the all of section 4. Additionally, I would like to strike in section 1 where it talks about reference to what will happen to future settlements. We really don't need to restrict future settlements. And the Attorney General has actually talked about how the process that you've all gone through and that we're all going through together could be used as a model for future settlements. So just striking out that sort of reference to future settlements. Those are my two changes to the amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Sam, can you show us the portion the second portion that we can strike? Or so that's it, section 2? Sam, if you're talking to me and helping us, I'm not hearing you.
There's this general language here about any court order or other agreement. Is that, Representative Warren, is that what?
Some of that will need to stay, but any reference to future settlements we'd like to remove. Okay. So I can't actually say strike that whole section, but we'd like it to be rephrased so it doesn't limit what happens with future settlements.
Okay. And I'm happy to work with Representative Warren and the Attorney General to make sure that the language reflects that intent clearly.
Great, thank you. We've also been joined by said Attorney General and want to give him a chance to weigh in here if you'd like to contribute. AG Fry?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the HHS committee. Good to be back with you, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about 1722. Representative Warren really hit everything very well on the head. Really just to highlight a couple of things around what the representative said, though. First on those changes that she discussed, I anticipate that the Recovery Council is going to be in the best position to determine how to defray costs of participation in the Recovery Council. There's going to be work at the front end that we are going to be very supportive of to establish bylaws and how the Recovery Council is going to be operating. And I anticipate that part of that conversation is going to end up involving discussion on how to defray costs for those members who don't have any other compensation that may support them in meaningfully participating in the council. So it's not to say that this issue isn't able to be addressed. I think that Representative Warren appreciated our position that really the Recovery Council is going to be in the best position to determine how to ensure that those costs are appropriately addressed. So I appreciated that suggestion for the committee's consideration. Secondly, I would note that the current MOU, it not only contemplates that this recovery fund is going to be receiving funds from the settlement with Johnson & Johnson or Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Cardinal Health, AmerisourceBergen, and McKesson. Those are the groups that we've talked about in the last couple of times that I've been before the committee. Folks may have also recognized that it contemplates that receipts from Purdue Pharma in Mallinckrodt settlements would also pour into the recovery fund. because it recognizes that the same plaintiffs that are involved in the litigation for Purdue and for Mallinckrodt are the same plaintiffs that are involved in the cases that we're settling out right now. And so we anticipate that this template, if it works, is going to be the way to drive opioid abatement recovery dollars in the moving forward. But I appreciated the understanding that since we don't know what those negotiations are going to look like yet, and sort of what those dynamics are going to be, I appreciated that that my office was heard about, not binding the hands of how these cases in the future are litigated. Again, recognizing that there's already been some contemplation of future opioid settlements going into this fund. And then finally, I'll state that I want to corroborate the representation of the representative that what's been put forward here is consistent with what was anticipated in the MOU, and am supportive of that as the representative has provided it.
Very good. Thank you. Representative Javner.
Thank you, Senator Claxton. Thank you, Attorney General Frey. So I have a question. You stated if it works. So if what are the benchmarks then for success that we're going to be looking towards as we move through this process for you as your office? That's one question. Two, so according to the MOU in your office and how all of this is going to play out, what is it that this bill will help, will be able to help your office be successful?
So thank you, Representative. So certainly don't want to cast a pallor over the potential success of the Recovery Council. It really is just a recognition that, this is a tremendous opportunity. There's been a lot of work put in by a range of individuals to make sure that we have the right system set up to balance voices, to make sure that, we have a range of abatement related activities that are going to be able to be funded. And so it's recognizing that as we move forward, we are going to learn lessons about what works best, what maybe is working okay, and some things that we just couldn't anticipate, right? I mean, that's like any project or any program. And so the way in which we're going to be looking at that, right, which I really think is the crux of your question and very important, is, there is going to be annual reporting that comes out from how these how the Recovery Council is working, programs it's supporting, or money, how it's expending money. So there'll be that transparency that allows for both internal and external assessment of how it's working. New ways in which to support people in recovery are going to be coming online and be recognized. And so I expect that this is going to be part of a ongoing public conversation that'll help make sure that over the 18 years of these particular settlements, right? Because as you may recall, these settlements go over 18 years. We anticipate this is going to work, but we recognize that over the next 18 years, things are going to change, and just having that flexibility is something that that we also have to keep in mind. And then secondly, my notes, I only have half of the second question. I did not write the important half. What was that second question, Representative Javner? I did not, my notes
It's
are
okay. I apologize. I really just want to hear from you the main points of how this bill is going to allow your office to fulfill what the MOU is asking of us.
Yes, thank you. So I only had half of what will this bill do. So thank you for that clarification and understanding. So what this language will do, so two things. One, one of the things that I consider to be very important in this process is to make sure that the legislature had the additional ability to provide up to 4 members, right? So members that had not been identified in the MOU, up to 4 more members to the council. This bill does that. So it allows the legislature to weigh in that way. made sure, my team, we made sure to build that in. So that's number one. Number two, this language does corroborate the work that we did to establish the Recovery Council through the agreement, and to make sure it's clear as to what fund is going to go into. That clarification, that corroboration is beneficial. So to the extent that it really fulfills, part of the aspiration that was contemplated about the legislature being able to add some voices to this conversation, as well as making it clear, corroborating through statute, the fund that's set up clearly for this money. That is how I understand that this amendment would support the work that we did to arrive at this global settlement.
Thank you very much.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, Senator Claxton. I was writing away here. And I really do appreciate that your comments there, Attorney General Farkas. That was some of the things I was concerned about. Do we really need the statute? Do we need to have it all spelled out like this? And is it really necessary? But I guess one of the questions that I have, well, number one is, who decided the 4 additional folks where they would be from? Because that's question number one. And number two, do we really want to tie it down and make it so set into stone in statute for these 4 additional that are supposed to, my understanding is to be somewhat flexible for the advisory council itself?
Thank you for that opportunity to clarify, because those are also some very valuable questions. So first, in terms of the 4 individuals that were identified for the committee's consideration, I believe that may come from the sponsor. My job, as I saw it, was to make sure that the legislature had the ability to provide additional voices. And I really think it's important for the legislature to have that conversation about, how those 4 slots may be used to best reflect the legislative interest. So I think probably that question is best directed to Representative Warren. In terms of the tying down, as we've talked about with respect to another settlement, right, with the Fund for Healthy Maine settlement, where no legislature is able to bind a future legislature, to the extent that over the next 18 years, there's, different perspectives or different thoughts about what voices are needed from the legislature to fill these 4 spots. The legislature is going to be able to change or to withdraw, like cancel out, or allow to remain those 4 positions. So I think statute is probably, I guess I can't think of a different way to do it. Probably statute is the best way to reflect that legislative intent as to how those 4 positions are going to be filled. And again, in terms of the tying down, if it's really going to be up to the legislature to determine if it wants to maintain those positions or not. So that's for example, 10 years from now, probably many folks will be termed out. There'll be different, people around the table unless they ran for a different house, right? Or different chamber. And so, by and large, you're going to just have different folks who are thinking about how to best reflect the legislative voices on this Recovery Council through the legislative process, through statutory change, through notwithstanding statute opportunities. So I certainly don't mean to go on and on about that, but I guess that's a way of saying it's a way that solidifies those legislative voices that are being added, but it is not tying down the legislature so much that it can't change based on the legislature's interest in changing those.
Does that answer your question, Senator?
Just then a follow-up question to Representative Warren. How did you arrive at these 4 designations, I guess I should say?
Yes, thank you, Senator Moore. So as AG Fry just said, these 4 seats are about making sure that the legislature has a voice in this council. And how we came up with the 4 designations of who would be represented is from the large group that we're working with of folks on the ground now doing this current work. So folks who are actually the people out there helping and working to get people into long-term recovery. Those are the folks that were at the table, and these decisions were made by them, and I am merely just the voice bringing them forward. Thank you.
Representative Lemelin?
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Attorney General, you said there was going to be reports from this. Who will be given those reports or receiving them?
Yes, thank you. So it is expected that reporting will be coming from the Recovery Council to the legislature as contemplated by the MOU. It will be these reports will be directed to at least well, to the public, and it actually doesn't specify to where in the legislature, just reporting to the legislature. So I would anticipate that, although I guess it's not clearly spelled out, that HHS appropriations in particular would be particularly interested in this annual report. I can also tell you that that when I've been thinking about this, and this is also contemplated in the legislation, the legislative review section of the MOU, I have contemplated that HHS and AFA are going to be the primary committees that have an interest in what's going on a regular basis. Let me add, by the way, that to the extent that I know I receive calls from time to time about the status of different things, I'm hoping that folks don't feel like they're going to have to wait for the report to find out how things are going. If legislators in particular are interested in what the status is, or committees are interested on what the status is, I have no reason to believe that I'm not going to be just as available, as long as I have the privilege of holding this decision, to sit down with committees and discuss progress outside of a reporting schedule. So I just offer those two different thoughts, Representative.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would like a little more specifics to within this bill to who might receive those and the timing of them.
Representative Warren, how does that sound to you? My first question is, it's not stipulated in the MOU, is it, AG Fry? So do we want to include a language that directs it to a minimum of certain places and a frequency?
Well, I guess what I'd offer is that there is a reporting that is required by September 1st of each year that comes out, and to be communicated over to the legislature by October 1st. This MOU contemplates that reporting. I guess one concern I would have is I do appreciate the legislative interest in the reporting, which is why I identified that's why, just like I've presented at least twice for cumulative 2 hours on this to the committee, that there's going to be questions, there's going to be input. We've provided information to the committees. I don't know to what extent outside of the MOU it's going to be easy to facilitate additional imposition of what the Recovery Council is going to be required to do, particularly when there are members of the legislature who are on the Recovery Council. There's members from the administration of the Recovery Council. So that's just my reflection of, we tried to balance the ability for the legislature to be involved, for the executive branch to be involved in these decision-making. We're talking about 6 members from the legislature who are going to be engaged in this process. And so adding obligations on the Recovery Council, I'm just not sure how that's going to impact on the agreement that we reached with the school districts and the political subdivisions.
Okay, Representative Warren, did you have any thought in response to Representative Lemelin's question?
Yes, I do. I believe that the MOU states that DAFs, it's the Department of Administration and Financial Services, will report that information back to the legislature. I didn't read all 53 pages, but it is in there, and I believe that was contemplated there. Certainly, if it isn't, we could put it into this statute, but I believe it's there.
Sam, did you have something you wanted to contribute to this conversation? Sam Senate?
Yeah, I did want to note that on the bottom of page 3 of the MOU, there's language that talks about the Recovery Council, states the Recovery Council shall develop a centralized public dashboard or other repository of publication of expenditure data from any party or regional council that receives recovery funds. So there is that in terms of public information that's required by the MOU as well.
But limited to expenditures based on the language you just read.
It also says, sorry to go on, the council may also require outcome-related data from any entity that receives recovery funds. And that for purposes of funding the dashboard, the council shall make every effort to use existing state resources. So that's that
Okay.
full language. Yeah.
So that's a broader charge than just disbursements. How is that sounding to you, Representative Lemelin?
Yeah, we're getting better. Thank you, Senator.
Okay. We're getting closer. Thank you for your patience. Representative Zager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for your work on this. I also really appreciate what Representative Warren has done leading this piece of legislation. I'm interested in the piece of the flow of dollars into the account. As I read it, it looks like there's another special revenue account. Attorney General Frye, can you please describe how, you know, to the extent that this will assure that money that is intended for recovery gets to that effort? Can you place this in the landscape that this committee has talked a lot about with regard to the tobacco settlement, with regard to the usual fiscal process, with regard to efficiency main trusts and all that? Can you just kind of describe that for us as we contemplate this?
Yes, thank you very much. And that is, as I've already sort of raised the issue of Fund Healthy Maine, I very much appreciate paying attention to that point. So there's a court order that's going to direct, and well, the court order is not in place yet. I mean, it still has to be filed, still has to be certified. That's why we're referring to the MOU. But once the court order is finalized, it will be directing into a specific fund. So not to the general fund, you know, not someplace else, to a specific fund that is intended to be accessed consistent with those purposes that have been identified by the settlement agreement, by the MOU. And so it's a specific, to the extent that there may be efforts to try to divert funding to roads, to buildings, to, you know, away from these activities. There's a court order that's going to be backing that up, so that there can be, you know, some court action to enforce the court order on how that money has flowed and what the purposes of the money are supposed to be, right? So I to the extent that it's flowing into a specific account, that account is those monies that are flowing into that account, they must be used consistent with the court order. So that's a really long way of getting to what could have been a shorter answer, which is at the head of all this is going to be a court order that specifies how these funds are supposed to be spent. If for some reason there's some effort to try to usurp that account, then there'd be the ability for the Attorney General to go and have the court order enforced and have you know, a party held accountable for trying to divert funds from those purposes.
Thank you. That helps a lot. Appreciate it.
And this version of the LD 1722 doesn't change any of the designated flow of money in the MOU. Thank you. Representative Perry?
Okay, I'm nosy. I would like something to say, not in necessarily MOU, but when you say to the legislature that as a Health and Human Services will receive a report from the Attorney General's office regarding the fund once a year, January of the, somewhere in that time. I'd love it in there because we get a lot of reports and sometimes they get lost, but this is too important to just say, go to the legislature. So is there a way we can put that wording in there?
Well, I'd have to see if I can get parties to agree to changing the MOU in order to have that consistent with what the parties have agreed to. As I indicated, there's going to be 6 folks that the legislature is responsible for appointing, who I would assume there's going to be a direct line in to the legislature. There is a report that goes to the legislature. In terms of the specific direction, as long as I hold the office, there's 2 committees that I believe need to see this, HHS and AFA. That was my personal commitment. So I don't, to the extent that there are 2 clear opportunities, and then of course, there's also going to be information that individual members can access separately, and I appreciated that Sam had pointed that out. I mean, again, I appreciate that there's different ways in which different groups, different individuals prefer to receive information. There's a lot of different ways we could direct this resource out. It's going to start to occupy a lot of time if we have to do a lot of different things. I think there's going to be ample opportunity for folks to get information, and I just worry to what extent we're going to legislate some but not others. But I hear your point, Representative. That's not to try to minimize what you're asking for. I agree that HHS in particular has an interest in receiving this information.
And I would like to formalize it because I think it offers for a continuity that just saying the legislature does not give us, there are a whole lot of things that are reports that come back get lost in the ether. And I would really like something, that some report be directed at HHS. This is a health issue. It's not just about money, and AFA has the right to get that. But as Health and Human Services, I really want to, somewhere in the legislation, have the ability to say that an annual report will be directly sent or reported to Health and Human Services on an annual basis.
So let me go to Sam a minute. Sam, is that something we could add as under section 4, the Maine Recovery Council, part 5, as a duty, the Maine Recovery Council is to report once a year to the Health and Human Services Committee on its work?
I think, respectfully, Senator, I would defer to the Attorney General on that because I would not want to write in anything that could conflict in any way with the MOU.
Sure.
So
Okay.
I would hesitate to answer that, actually.
Let me go. Okay, let me go to Representative Warren. What do you think about the concern about getting some sort of predictable report to HHS?
Thank you, Senator. There are a couple of places in the MOU where it says that this information should come to the legislature. And I just want to give you that information first. On page 5, section H, it's very clear about the date and its DAFs. Also in section 4, in section 4E, it further talks about the report. So that's already in the MOU, but I don't see that it would in any way change the MOU if additionally in this bill, with the Attorney General agreeing, of course, additionally in this bill, it specifically says that report, which is required by the MOU, be also presented to the HHS committee. I certainly support that. And it wouldn't change the MOU. It would just mean that that report that's already needs to be established is delivered to you all by a certain date.
Okay, so that's I is the most explicit explanation of this. If there is more, so that, but that requires that there be legislation in being considered.
If you look at H, there's annual reporting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was reading from the bottom up, of course.
And also in section 4E, there's also reference.
Yeah. So that's the December report. Having jurisdiction over Health and Human Services were mentioned specifically there as an annual report made available in December.
As the treasurer of the state, we want to look at more than just the money. You know, and that's why I want to see a report that does more than just the money.
Sam, can you show us the language where it references outcomes?
This is the dashboard.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't include a report function there either. So the question is there some easy way that we can stipulate that a report or the report comes to HHS without having to revisit the MOU? I don't think that's on your agenda. Is it, having negotiated to redo the MOU, Representative Perry? Yeah, so we're just looking for a 101 version of how to get the report to us, not a 401. Representative Warren.
Thank you, Senator. We kind of skipped over section H, but it does talk about content there. Is that what you're looking for, Representative Perry?
Let's go back to H, and Sam can find that paragraph for us. So we're looking for H, are we? Yeah. Annual report.
So that report, so that is a report. So I can read it if it's helpful. A state agency that receives allocations from a fund, county, city, or contractor or vendor that receives funding allocated from the fund shall maintain that money in a separate account and shall submit a report to the Commissioner of DAFs, providing a description of the use of those funds. And so the DAFs commissioner then annually compiles a report and submits that report to the legislature. So it's just, I think the only issue then there is that it's just not specific that it's for the Health and Human Services Committee.
Okay, there are, you know, and maybe I'm asking for too much, but I want more than just the money. I really want to see where the programming is. And you know, some sense of results. I don't know how to describe that, but I guess I'm looking for not only a report about the money, but also the programs that money funds.
So H includes a description of the funds. What's not included there is the outcomes information and the success, the metrics, clinical metrics. How are we going to know it's being successful? Okay.
Is that what?
Thank you, Sam. Attorney Fry.
Yes, thank you. So to the extent that there was a question about what might be consistent with the MOU, what might not be consistent with the MOU, certainly to the extent that there's already a contemplation of certain reports being prepared and there's an ask that those reports all be presented to HHS, then I don't see a problem with that, right? I mean, that's consistent. That's not going to increase or it's not going to be legislatively directed activity as to how the, fund has to spend its money. If it's looking for something different than what's already contemplated as being reporting, I do think that that's a different conversation as to what's going to be required of the Recovery Council to develop reporting materials to provide to HHS. But if this is really about just making sure that all of the information that's being put together, that's being provided on, through the dashboard, through, the treasurer, through DAFs, if it's really just about making sure those all get directed to HHS, I would agree with Representative Warren. I don't see an issue with that.
Well, that's a great start.
I think that's what the request was. Is there a job description for the Maine Recovery Council in the MOU?
Only that they will meet and develop their own bylaws. Is that? I mean, so this really is expected to be the Recovery Council sitting down, hearing out how they're going to operate through their guidelines. I guess that would be the, other than the fact that they're going to be responsible for making decisions about how these resources are going to be directed. It's anticipated that they're going to, when they first meet, they'll develop bylaws on how to operate.
Yep. Okay. Representative Madigan.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I understand Representative Perry. I mean, I think what you're basically asking for is like, hey, like one of the annual reports we get every year where someone comes in and we get assigned a book report, or they come before us and say, hey, this is how we spent the money. This is what the results were. That's what you want.
That's what I'm looking for.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. We get that for a lot of other things. And it sounds like that would fit with what the Recovery Council could do. I mean, we already have places like the Maine Children's Trust or other commissions and things like that, that part of generating that annual report is what they do.
So I come back to my question about adding a paragraph 5 under Maine Recovery Council in the amendment we have that stipulates as part of the council's responsibilities, they should come up with a plan for communicating with the legislature on a regular basis, the results. Go ahead, Sam. I can see you're thinking.
I'm trying. So, and this is also a question for Attorney General Fry. I wonder if where we're getting stuck here is adding more duties to the council, which is a body of the MOU. If we were to instead say the legislature, the Attorney General shall give a report on how the funds were spent, I wonder if that avoids some of the problems of messing with the MOU.
So if I may, that would be more in line with what it is that we have been trying to do with this Recovery Council about insulating it from directives from the executive branch, from the legislature. That's why all these different voices were brought together on the council to presumably be representative of the interests of the executive, the legislative. I do think it's perfectly appropriate, and you've heard me say this probably a couple of times in my last presentations. One of the checks is the fact that the legislature does have a level of authority over both persuasive and actual over the Attorney General in terms of what ends up getting reported back. And so I appreciate the suggestion, Sam, because I have anticipated that my office would be, responsible for communicating with the legislature, with the executive branch about sort of how this is operating. So I think that is a better suggestion that's more consistent with what was contemplated in this arrangement. Actually, that was the first thing I said, Attorney General, that you would report to us around this. I misunderstood. I thought the U was the Recovery Council. I didn't understand it as my property. Your designee.
Yeah, the AG or a designee. So let me go back, loop around to Representative Lemelin. Would that address some of your concerns if we count on the HE getting us a report on a regular basis to HHS?
Yes, Senator, that's why I raised my hand. That's what I was looking for. So if we can come up with a specific timing, and the fact that he's going to give a report to us, because I agree 100% with Representative Perry. I would like to hear back. So thank you.
Sure. Who else raised that issue besides Representative Perry? Are we getting close to your concerns, Representative Perry, by?
Absolutely.
Okay. Very good. So it sounds like the next step might be for Sam and Representative Warren and A.G. Fry to kind of wedge a line in there. We've used the term the Perry Amendment before, but this would have to be the Lemelin Perry Amendment to get those kind of reports. Does that sound? I see Representative Warren's head nodding, and we're tasking you with another task, Attorney General Fry. Is that okay?
Absolutely fine, and we can find the appropriate place to tuck that in. I want to think a little bit about where, but yeah, no, now that I understand I did not understand that was the request from either Representative Lemelin or Perry. I understood there was an increase in transparency, but it makes perfect sense to build that into AG's responsibilities.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, Sam doesn't get a chance to say no. So if you'll work with the principals we just identified to find a place to give this a home, then I think we've answered that question. Oh, no. Representative Perry?
Actually, I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
as amended and discussed.
I'll second that
Seconded.
motion.
Okay. And the amendment is the sponsor's amendment, striking some language in 2 sections at her request, and coming up with some additional language that would get the HHS the desired report. Those are the amendments that I'm aware of. Am I missing anything? Okay, so there's been a motion made. Thank you, Representative Perry, and seconded by the committee. Any further discussion? And with those changes, I would go to Karen to collect the vote.
Thank you, Senator. And just to be clear, I heard Senator Moore's voice first on the second.
Okay.
So that's
All right.
what we're going with.
Okay, we'll go with Senator Moore as seconding the motion.
Okay, Representative Zager.
Yes.
Representative Zager, yes. Representative Lemelin.
Yes.
Representative Lemelin, yes. Representative Stover.
Yes.
Representative Stover, yes. Senator Baldacci. Senator Baldacci is absent. Representative Perry.
Yes.
Representative Perry, yes. Representative Madigan is on the phone. We'll circle back. Representative Craven.
Yes.
Representative Craven, yes. Representative Connor. Representative Connor is absent. Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Griffin, yes. Representative Jabner.
Yes.
Representative Jabner, yes. Senator Moore.
Yes.
Senator Moore, yes. Representative Meyer.
Yes.
Representative Meyer, yes. Senator Claxton.
Yes.
Senator Claxton, yes.
So the committee thanks Attorney Fry for being here and your efforts and taking on some extra work, and Representative Warren for dovetailing your amendment to circumstances that have only changed a bit in the last year. And thank you for that. And thanks for the committee for its work.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you again. All right. So I'm not aware of other business to come before the committee. So Sam, you're between us and adjournment, so no pressure there. So if we're good to adjourn until tomorrow.
So moved.
My schedule shows a 10 a.m. start. It's been moved and seconded. With show of hands, we'll see everybody tomorrow at 10. Thank you all. We're getting there. We're getting there, people.